Yeah, I know I'm behind on these reviews, but these recommendations are for forever, so deal with it. Hereditary. Hereditary is a surprisingly divisive movie. Love it because of the slow burning tension, the subtle scary moments, the wow factor of the more intense scary moments, the attention to detail, or hate it because of how long it drags, how artsy it portrays itself, the fan praise of how amazing it is, which is a weird reason to hate something. Everyone likes it, so it must be garbage.
I bet you hate movies that are universally loved.
I don't even...
You like Forrest Gump?
No, it's a horrendous piece of shit.
Life is like a box of chocolates, no?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with it.
You never know what you're gonna get.
At first watch, I was more on the side of it was a little long and not that good, but on the second watch, I loved it. I loved the slow burn aspect of it, the character growth, the little Easter eggs, and the scares that you'll miss unless the movie had 100% of your attention. When it comes to watching, well, anything, I always prefer a focused watch more than a casual watch. I want to give the story my full attention. I want to catch all the subtle hints that things are not quite as they seem. Little glances or gestures that could be clues to characters' true motivations. I don't want to throw on something just for white noise while I'm doing something else.
This is overpowering.
It's getting worse.
Yes, it certainly doesn't like that I'm here, and I cannot help you.
What?
In fact, I've got to get out of here. This thing is very aggravated, the fact that I'm here.
Wait, everybody calm down. We need your help.
All Paranormal Activity movies are shit. Every single one of them. The only exception I would make would be something I would throw on while I'm trying to sleep, to relax whatever is left in my skull.
Not to 50!
Peaceful. Hereditary is a pretty famous movie, so I'm gonna spoil it because I want to talk about it. The movie starts off with some text going over the death of the grandmother of the family we are going to follow in this film. The camera zooms in on an art crafting room of the house where the mom, Annie, makes these elaborately detailed doll houses. The camera zooms in more into a bedroom and seamlessly transitions into the real bedroom of Peter, the son. The family gets ready for the funeral of the grandma. Annie gives a eulogy that paints the grandma as a secretive and private person, and she also says some lighthearted things that don't seem as genuine. The family comes home, and it really seems like the death didn't really have that much of an impact on the family. Except Charlie, the super awkward daughter who likes to draw and has a mouth-clicking habit that goes like that. But she doesn't seem sad in the traditional sense. The mom goes through some of the grandma stuff, and right before going to bed, we get our first creepy scare of seeing the grandma in the dark. It's the kind of scare that you'll miss unless you're watching it in complete dark and you're paying attention. Put your damn phones away. At school the next day, Charlie finds a pigeon that flew into the window and died, so she obviously cuts the head off with some scissors and pockets it like it's a quarter or something. Crazy. At home, the dad, Steve, gets a call that someone desecrated the grandma's grave. Ooh, things are happening. The mom secretly attends a grieving group session, and she opens up that her grandma was a Class A nut job. A few minor details here and there, but basically the family is being watched by someone or something or a group of people. Peter gets invited to a school party and is forced to bring Charlie with him. At the party, Peter blows off Charlie to chill with some friends.
Without it.
Meanwhile, Charlie eats some cake that has some nuts in it, which she is deathly allergic to. So Peter rushes Charlie to the hospital. While in the backseat, Charlie can't breathe, so she sticks her head out the window, which isn't really safe. I mean, it's a fast-moving car. Where is this girl's head at? Oh. There it is. I found it. Peter can't quite believe what has happened, so he just drives home with his little sister. In his defense, he is bringing back most of her. So the next morning, the mom loses her head. Mind. She loses her mind. So there's a funeral for Charlie, and the family goes through their mourning process in their own ways. The mom is being super distant with Peter, like waiting for him to come home so she can leave. She goes to the group therapy and meets a friend, Joan. Later on, she does meet up with her again at her place, and at the foot of their door, there is a homemade welcome mat. And Annie mentions to Joan that her mom used to make the welcome mats just like that. And Joan responds, "Oh, how funny." Uh-huh? So Annie opens up to Joan that a couple of years ago, she sleepwalked into Peter and Charlie's room when they were sharing a room, doused him with paint thinner, and when she lit the match, it woke her up. Holy hell! Does anybody in this family have a good head on their shoulders? By the way, Annie is recreating the scene from the accident in her dollhouse workshop, so no. The answer to my previous question is no. So the family has a dinner that goes as well as the dinner for Schmuck's dinner went.
She's talking to the lobster.
The what?
The next day, Annie goes to the art supply store and coincidentally runs into Joan, who then convinces Annie to go back to her place again to do a seance to commune with the dead that she did the night before. And Joan has this kind of grandma vibe to her, so the second she grabs you by the hand, she could convince you to do anything. Even perform a demonic ritual to sever your own head and have demon possess your son. Whoops, I kind of got a little ahead of myself here. So Joan does the seance and Annie freaks out because it works. Annie tries to bolt, but Joan says to try it at home with everyone and specifically says her son has to be present. So Annie that night has a messed up nightmare, and it's a good thing it was all a dream because she says some messed up things to Peter. But she wakes up from the dream and tells the family, it's ritual time. So Annie does the ritual and it freaks everyone the hell out. And the next day shit just keeps on getting worse and worse. Peter sees shit at school, Annie trashes all of her work, and Steve the dad is thinking of keeping Peter away from Annie. So Annie starts thinking that maybe the ritual wasn't a good idea. So she tries to burn Charlie's drawing book, which is what she used in the seance, but as the book burns, Annie burns. So she nopes out of that idea and pulls the book out. And she heads to Joan's place for answers. She knocks on her door, but no one answers. We get a view of inside her place, and we see some serious ritualistic stuff. So, yeah, Joan was not really a friend. Annie checks out the doormat, runs home and looks at the box of her mom's stuff and sees the exact same style of mats. Nice detective work. She also sees like 24 photos of Joan with her grandma, so there were a couple of clues that kind of got glossed over. She also found a book on how to invoke Paimon, one of the 8 kings of hell. How anyone would be able to figure out how to do that is beyond me. Annie also finds her mom's dug up corpse with the head cut off, and right above it is this weird reoccurring symbol that we have seen a couple times throughout the movie. You'd have to give the movie a rewatch and play a little I Spy to find them all. Meanwhile, Steve brings Peter home from school because he slammed his face into his desk. Anything to get out of class. While Peter is resting, Annie tells and shows Steve everything. But Steve immediately thinks it's all Annie and or all in her head. She begs Steve to burn Charlie's book even though it will kill her. He doesn't do it, so she just chucks it into the fire and Steve immediately turns into a human torch. Which is weird when you think about it. Like, it would make sense if Steve hucked it and then he caught on fire, like there's a protection spell on it. But Annie throws it in once and it burns her. Throws it in twice and Steve burns? I don't know. The burning gives Annie a shocked face, but a quick reflective light gives her a possessed face, which is a light that we have seen several times in the film. You will have missed it a few times unless you were focused. So then Peter wakes up and his house is turned into a nut house, filled with corpses, nudists, and his mom doing some insanely freaky shit. Although, he may have given himself a concussion earlier, so maybe his head's not in the right place. Couldn't resist. So Peter makes his way to the attic and sees where the grandma's corpse used to be, only to see his mother piano wiring her own head off just above him. And I guess she just wanted to make sure that her son got ahead in life. Okay, that was the last one. So in the attic, Peter sees some more nudists and just bolts out the window. As Peter lies face down in the dirt, you can hear Annie's head sever from her body. A beam of light floats over Peter. Peter stands up and does the mouth clicking noise like Charlie did. He also sees his mother's headless body float towards the treehouse. Peter goes up and sees everyone bowing to him, even his headless mother and grandmother. Joan places a crown in and dresses Peter as Charlie and says that everything will be okay. Charlie is Paimon, one of the 8 kings of hell. She and her followers reject the Trinity. They have provided payment a healthy male host. They will worship him so that they will receive his secrets, along with wealth, knowledge, and good familiars. The earth goes to sleep that night as it hears shouts of, "Hail Payman!" And with the sun come morning, the earth will awake and have a new ruler. What a trip this movie is. I said it before and I'll say it again, this movie deserves 2 watches so you can really grasp everything that happens. This cult is seriously connected and may even know the future with the series of events that have had happened in order to bring payment into the world. Great movie, I highly recommend it. Terrified.
¿Qué es lo que está pasando, chiquito? ¿Por qué viniste a visitarnos? ¿Qué es lo que te trajo hasta acá?
Terrified is a Spanish, otherworldly kind of horror movie, which is awesome. One of the best parts of horror universes that talk about or open ways to other dimensions or worlds or whatever is variety. And oh boy, do I love it when stories with new concepts have a lot going on, and this movie definitely has a lot going on. I am going to spoil this one because it's more fun when I do. The movie starts off with a wife hearing voices coming from her kitchen sink. The voices say that they are going to kill her. Later that night, her husband is awoken by loud banging noises. He thinks it's coming from his neighbors, so he goes to cuss him out, but he's not home, or he's not just answering. So the husband returns home defeated. He hears loud banging again, but it's not coming from his neighbor Walter. He goes to the bathroom only to see the bloody corpse that used to be his wife painting the bathroom walls red with her blood. The husband cries desperately, but to no avail. Her body is flown wall to wall with no sign of struggle or the entity that is making her do this. We flash forwarded to the husband Juan recanting the story to 3 individuals. Hano, who is a former police forensic specialist who has experience with supernatural cases, Mora, who is a well-renowned supernatural investigator, and Rosentuck, who is Mora's American colleague. They ask Juan to tell them everything that happened before his wife's death. A few weeks earlier, there was an accident in the neighborhood. The movie then jumps back a few weeks and focuses on the neighbor, Walter. Walter is just losing his damn mind in his house, and whatever is happening to his place, it's not subtle. Things are happening when Walter is asleep, awake, at night, and during the middle of the day. It even happens in the corner of his eyes and then right in his face. He desperately seeks the help of Mora, but he keeps getting blown off by the receptionist. And like, I get it, in this field I'm sure there are a lot of prank calls and people trying to fake grave encounters.
That's 20 bucks, Sam. I'm standing here with the resident gardener, Javier Ortega. Javier, have you ever seen anything strange in the past 10 years of working here?
Yeah, I saw a ghost over here. It was really scary.
But this guy is very persistent, but is still not getting any help, so he tries to get evidence to prove all the shit that's been happening to him. And weirdly enough, he actually gets it. Like the first night of him recording stuff, he catches all of it on a tape, which does not normally happen in these kinds of movies. The next day, a kid is getting water from a faucet in Walter's yard, but he tells the kid to go away, which makes the kid slowly back into the street and he gets hit by a bus. We then jump to 4 days later, and Hano gets woken up in the middle of the night by Funes, a police commissioner. He tells Hano to come to the house of the mother whose kid died. Hano arrives and sees a young boy at the dining room table with a bowl of cereal and some milk. Problem is that he's a corpse, frozen in his place. After some discussion, Hano and Funes hit the lights and turn their backs, and the boy's milk spills. Ooh, spooky spooky. That morning, Hano is walking outside the house and just so happens to bump into Mora, who is just starting her investigation of Walter's house across the street. He invites her to check out the kid, and Hano thinks it's all a bunch of coincidences, but Mora doesn't think so. Another boy interacts with the dead kid and bolts. Hano then puts the body in the freezer so they could later rebury it. The movie jumps back to Juan and we find out the real reason why the paranormal trinity is there. They need Juan's signature to stay at his place and investigate it for the next few days. One will go to each house. Rosentuck will be in Walter's house, who has been missing for the last few days, and the last time we saw him, he came face to face with one of these humanoid monster things. Hano takes the place of the dead kid's house, and Mora's got Juan's place. If I had to pick, I'd go with the dead kid's house. I'd rather deal with zombies than ghosts or monsters. However, Rosentuck does have Funes with him in the beginning, even though Funes is planning to retire in 2 months, partially due to health reasons. A human shield is a human shield. Immediately, each person is encountering strange shit going on at the houses. It's one of the best aspects of this movie. We just jump in with both feet into the supernatural goodies. Rosentuck calls Mora ecstatic, saying that he thinks this is the nest where these creatures and supernatural events happen the strongest. We learn a few things about the creatures and where they come from. 1. They like blood.
Give her 3 stars.
2. They like the dark.
Hey, Bex, hold on.
3. Mora describes where they come from and our world are like slices in an orange. They all coexist together, and what connects us is the water. Microscopic beings travel through the water and can use our bodies like hosts. 4. Not everything we see in the movie we are supposed to trust, but that's not fun, so we're going to assume on some level everything we are seeing is real. And 5. Another cool aspect of this movie is that because these dimensions coexist together, you have to look at these things in very specific angles in order for them to be visible. For example, there's a scene where Rosentuck finds a monster under the bed and he shows Funes, but Funes can't see it because he's looking at it from the side of the bed, but when he walks around and looks at it at the end of the bed, the monster is there as clear as day. So since the 3 specialists are old as shit nerds and Funes has health issues, they're all screwed. As they should be. Not everyone can be like the Winchesters, where they literally have God's hand writing the plot so they always come out on top.
Freaking normal. That's what. Oh, come on!
So could we ever actually pick locks, or was it Chuck this whole time?
So Hano is the first to go, then Mora, then Rosentuck. Funes passes out but manages to get out of there, but then brings the ultimate cure-all.
Fire, and lots of it.
Oh, that's your cure for everything.
The movie ends with another trinity of people interviewing Juan at his jail, asking about the now dead Hanu, Mora, and Rosentuck. Also Funes, who is now a fugitive. And now Juan says Rosentuck is in the room, but no one else can see him, and we get a jump scare right before it cuts to black. So, it's not the best ending, but this movie has great scares, an interesting premise, and good actors. What knocks this movie down a few pegs is that there isn't a singular narrative or a protagonist. At first you think the movie will focus on Juan because his wife's crazy death was the first thing we saw. Then it jumps to Walter, the crazy neighbor who has had a lot of interaction with the monsters, but no, when he gets taken it jumps to Hanu, who would be our more experienced elderly man who would know much more on what to do. But in the last act, he is the first one to be taken, so it jumps to Detective Funes, who is the newbie of all of this, but is trying to keep everything under control so he can retire in peace. No one takes the center stage long enough to have an arc or a journey. They are all short-lived victim stories. What would have been better is if this was a mini-series, and there was one episode per main focus, but the stories overlap each other, and with each episode, you would get more and more information and connections that would make you want to go back and watch them to catch them all again. Another thing against this movie is that there's only Spanish audio, so unless you speak Spanish, you'll have to rely on English subtitles, and there are some spelling errors, and not everything that's said gets subtitles, which is really not excusable for a movie of this caliber. It is still a good movie, and I do recommend giving it a watch. Cronos. Cronos is a low-key Spanish vampire movie by Guillermo del Toro. Normally his name behind a movie gets a lot of hype, but this is early del Toro, where he does these slow-paced dramas with just a hint of supernatural aspect, and they are just so boring. This movie is on par with The Devil's Backbone and The Orphanage. However, Cronos has much more supernatural stuff in it than those movies, and it's not nearly as depressing. I will do heavy spoilers on this one. The movie starts off with some text talking about an alchemist who is trying to create a device that will grant eternal life. It would be called the Cronos device. We jump to present day and we get introduced to an old antique shop owner. A mysterious man walks around the shop seeming like he's just browsing, then leaves. Later on, cockroaches start pouring out of the angel statue that we saw the stranger looking at. The shopkeeper, Jesus, cracks the statue open, and at the base is a golden device, which kind of reminds me of Resident Evil, where you look behind a painting and there's a diamond eyeball taped to the back of it that you'll need to insert into a statue to open a secret door. We then get introduced to Hellboy?
What you looking at, John?
Wow, I didn't think him and Guillermo del Toro went back that far. So Hellboy has a sick rich uncle who is looking for Cronos. So Hellboy goes to the shop to pick up the statue, and he does this thing where he asks complete strangers their opinions on nose-shaped slides for his planned nose job. Fucking weird. So he buys the statue not knowing that the device has been removed and leaves. So it's after hours and Jesus is playing around with a device that is shaped like a bug, and he activates the stinger and it pierces his hand. His wife helps him out with the wound and pulls out the little tiny stinger. So wait, there's something inside this device? Later that night, Jesus wakes up with an unquenchable thirst. But for what? His wound also makes him itch like crazy, and for some reason he grabs Cronos and makes it sting him again. Why he'd think that would help? No idea. But this time, instead of ripping the damn thing off of him, he lets it stay and finish its process before naturally releasing its stinger.
Giggity. What? Nothing, it's stupid.
The next morning, he is feeling like a new man, shaves off his mustache, and goes to his shop. The place is trashed, but fortunately the burglars left him a business card. Wow, how thoughtful. Jesus goes to meet with Hellboy's sick uncle, who explains what the device really is. Inside it is a bug, which is responsible for the way Jesus is feeling, and the gold device is a kind of filter. Jesus leaves a decoy and bolts home. He continues to use Cronos on himself, which I guess makes him feel better because we don't really see any other health benefits. The wounds he gets from the device heal, but he still has bandages on his hand from when he first used it, which doesn't really add up, but whatever. He and his wife go to a celebration of what? I have no idea. Jesus goes to the bathroom and sees some blood near the sink and promptly licks it up. I know it's our first bit of vampirism in this movie, but fucking gross. While Jesus is dining on sink blood, Hellboy knocks him out and takes him outside to interrogate him. But it goes too far and Hellboy thinks he beat him to death, so he loads Jesus into a car and pushes it off a cliff. Jesus' body gets prepped for his funeral, and a lot of time has passed. They found the body, they prep it for the wake, and like seconds before he is thrown into the incinerator to be cremated, he wakes! Talk about a close call. And good on the movie for having Jesus wake up with his mouth sewn shut. But bad on them for not having his eyes glued shut. We finally get to see the wife reacting to her husband's death, and this is such a drama. I'm really glad Guillermo del Toro went down a different path in his career later on. Jesus goes back home and straight up approaches his adopted granddaughter, who I forgot to mention before, because she's not really an important part of the plot until now. But don't worry, the wife is still sidelined. Anyway, since Jesus died, he can no longer go out into the sun. Jesus goes to the sick rich uncle, who listens to Jesus bitch about his rotting skin and just leans forward and peels the skin off to reveal perfectly new skin underneath. Wow, this guy really knows everything about this device. The uncle tries to kill Jesus, but he gets his head cracked open by the granddaughter, which sounds cooler than it actually is. Hellboy comes and kicks the shit out of Jesus, and Jesus suicide dives with Hellboy to get a desperate upper hand. As Jesus' body weakens, he is tempted to drink his granddaughter's blood, but instead he destroys Cronos and dies. Which is an odd rule considering it's just a bug. After he dies, we finally get a scene where the wife reacts to him being reborn, and the movie ends. The wife is such a non-character in this film that it really kind of begs the question of why bother? Jesus should have just been widowed, because clearly the script didn't really know what to do with the wife. Like I said before, this is a low-key vampire movie, and it's to the point where you kind of have to ask, why bother trying it yourself? The only perk we see is that Jesus felt like a younger man and his wounds healed, but he gets no powers of any kind. No speed, strength, special abilities, nothing. He would have stayed a permanent 70-year-old man, but now drinks blood and can't go out into the sun. I'd fucking pass on this thing. There's zero temptation to even fantasize about using Cronos unless you start young, because one of the main perks of being a vampire are the powers. It's not just immortality. If you want that, then Dorian Gray is more your speed, and even then, there's only so much you can do with the human body. One of the good parts of this movie is seeing inside Cronos and how it works. Makes you kind of wonder what kind of bug would have these kinds of side effects. Sucks blood, can't be in the sun, heals fast, and has super long life. I can't think of a bug that has all of those perks. Maybe I'm focusing too much on this, but From Dusk Till Dawn did vampires like a different species pretty well. They were snakes and they had a lot of snake things about them, but Jesus didn't do anything bug-like in this film. Anyways, Cronos is super boring and it's not worth watching even if you got a thing for vampires like I do. Jacob's wife.
How much of that could I get?
You want the blood?
Jacob's Wife is yet another vampire movie. 2 in a row, and I ain't complaining. This one at first glance, it seems like they're going the Nosferatu style with how the fangs are, but these vampires are more rat related. Not my favorite style of vampire, but I definitely prefer vampires with fangs than without them.
I swear you would be of more use to me if I skinned you and turned your skin into a lampshade. Or fashioned you into a piece of high-end luggage. I could even add you to my collection.
Anyways, this was a fun, dark comedy, and I'm gonna spoil it. Movie starts off with a sermon about loving your wife, and our main character, Anne, is listening to her husband, Pastor Jacob, giving the sermon, and she looks like she wants him to burst into flames. Good thing wishes don't come true, otherwise this would be a very different movie. After the evening sermon, Amelia, a member whose mother has been on the sauce, lately asks the Reverend to stop by later to help her mom out. She's walking home and the sun starts to set. As she approaches her home, she gets taken by a Dracula-type monster. Ooh, I likey. Next day, the Reverend is informed that the girl is missing. Jacob and his wife Anne have dinner with Jacob's brother and his wife. They're all speculating that the girl ran off, but Anne is getting riled up of people assuming the worst and ekes out a "she wouldn't do that," but her response kind of gets blown off, which is a common theme in this movie. We get several scenes of her giving a death glare while her husband's fat ass gets fatter, his loud brushing echoes in her eardrums, and his never-ending snoring keeps her up at night. Excuse me. Anne goes and meets up with an old childhood flame, and they go to a mill for a recently done real estate deal Anne closed on. She brings him to the site for business, but he is here for pleasure. And, not surprising, she's kind of into it. But she resists, so good on her. They explore the place a bit and find 2 crates. One of them is filled with rats that just start chomping on the guy, while Dracula takes Anne. Anne comes home and she was obviously bitten. The next morning, Anne is acting weird and Jacob leaves for the church. On his way out, he encounters some asshole teens and takes the joint that they were smoking and bounces like a tough older guy. When he gets home, Anne is dressed dramatically in red and demands that they go out. From here on out, Anne is always overdressed, acting dramatic, and it definitely reminds me of someone.
Won't you join me for a little stroll through the slice of paradise I like to call the town where I currently am?
In the middle of the night, Anne waits till Jacob is asleep and just shoves him just to be a bitch. She later indulges in animal blood, but then vomits it up. Animal blood ain't gonna cut it in this movie.
I will dice you into a million little pieces and put those pieces in a box. A glass box that I will display on my mantle.
This movie is classified as a horror thriller, but it is definitely a dark comedy with the amount of humor that we're getting. Jacob plans to confront Anne's old fling just because through his eyes, everything changed when she met up with him. At night, Anne gets a visit from Dracula, who seems to control rats and even Anne. Dracula starts to make Anne touch herself, but Jacob interrupts her. The next day, Jacob heads to the mill to confront Anne's old fling, but finds the asshole kids instead. But wait. there's a surprise guest. Amelia leaps in and kills one of the kids. Her personality has done a complete 180. She's cynical, vulgar, overly violent, and toys with her food. Also, when she bit into a kid's throat, the blood was shooting out of him like it was a Tarantino film. She gets knocked out by one of the other teens, and the teen and Jakob flee. He goes home, and she goes to call the cops. Meanwhile, Anne is at home and gets visited by Dracula and wigs out. Her neighbor sees some of it and goes inside to help her out, and to repay his kindness, she turns him into a Pez dispenser. Jakob comes home and catches Anne in the act, but she says that she was being controlled when she killed the neighbor, and yeah, that's probably true. He helps her clean up the mess and even brushes the cops away. What's weird is that the neighbor turned even though his head was nearly sliced off. But Jakob stakes him and they bury him in the vegetable garden. Jakob plans to kill the master and assumes it'll change Anne back to who she was before, and this idea doesn't really sit well with Anne, but they go to the mill to kill Dracula, who they all call the Master. At the mill, Jakob almost kills Amelia, but Anne comes in and finishes the job, even though Jakob thought he could save her. This causes a huge rift between them, and Jakob pushes out and Anne calls him out on it, so he leaves her there. When Anne gets home, she finds Jakob being controlled by the Master with a blade to his throat. We get an eyeful of the Master, and it's a woman, and she looks like shit. The makeup is atrocious. They should have just left her hooded. The Master gives her the chance to die or thrive, and nicks Jakob's throat and leaves. Instead of eating her husband, Anne bangs him. What's funny is that she felt like she just had to pull her tit out for this scene, and she's the girlfriend in the Reanimator movie, who we also see naked, so in one marathon, we see him young and old. The next day, Anne's thirst gets out of control, and coincidentally, they get a call to check on a member of the church who hasn't picked up the phone in a bit, so they go to their house and they find an old woman who died in her sleep. So they take her home so Anne can dig in. While Anne preps the body, Jakob heads to the mill while the sun is out. But some of the people saw what they did, so the cops pick up Jakob, then go to his house because Jakob's brother and wife walk in on Anne draining a body, and they call the cops. It's kind of weird that Anne didn't stop them, but whatever. While the cops are on their way, the Master makes Anne's in-laws into her playthings, and then she kills them. She offers Anne more power, freedom, and the ability to control her hunger if she accepts the Master's blood. Pretty enticing stuff. The cops and Jakob show up, and Jakob stakes the Master in the back right before Anne takes her blood. She's pissed at Jakob for making the choice for her. The cops bounce and mark this up as a domestic dispute, non-violent, even though there's 2 bodies in the backyard. Stupid. The next morning, Jakob and Anne plan their future, but Anne is hungry and Jakob doesn't trust her, and the movie ends with a freeze frame on Anne baring her fangs and Jakob wielding a stake. So how was it? I actually really liked it. It's fun, over the top with its violence, and funny. There is a bit of inconsistency. When Amelia gets staked through the mouth, she turns into a puddle of blood. When the Master gets staked, she dissolves until only a rat remains. Speaking of, they really should have killed that rat, just in case. But the guy Anne eats and then Jakob stakes, neither of these things happen, and they have to bury him in the backyard. That's whatever. The Master is a bit annoying with her female empowerment, making men out to be the problem in the world when she is a malicious monster. But Anne always sticks up for Jakob to other people, and when it's just them, she mostly wants more of a say in what happens and to be heard. She doesn't hate him, but she's just tired of being seen as Jakob's wife. I recommend this one if you're looking for a good time. Devil's Candy.
They won't let me play it loud. I need to play it loud.
You need to leave now.
Devil's Candy is a one-of-a-kind. It has the devil and heavy metal.
I am complete.
Okay, but this one is a horror thriller movie. This is a nice low-budget, small-cast movie about a young family of metalheads moving into a house where some murders happen, and the dad starts hearing voices that are not so friendly, to put it lightly. Alright, let's dive in with spoilers. The movie starts off with a man waking up in the middle of the night hearing voices, so he plays heavy metal to drown out the noise. And when his mom interrupts him and tells him to stop playing, he says it drowns out the voices. She threatens to put him back into a mental hospital, which gets a very prompt, straight-to-the-point response. Yeah, he knocks her down some stairs and she dies. Her husband comes home and sees her on the floor, and later on he dies. We don't see it, so we don't know if it was a murder or not. We fast forward and meet our main family. The dad, Jesse, is an artist metalhead who does commissions on work that he has no passion in doing just to pay the bills. The daughter, Zoe, follows in her dad's footsteps as a metalhead, and the mom, Astrid, is a hairdresser. But she's surprisingly not a metalhead. They go to see a house for sale, and coincidentally, it's the house where the murders happened. They seriously consider it because it's a super big and super cheap place. Wow, so you're telling me that a painter and a hairstylist aren't rolling in cash? Who knew? They move in and try to adjust, but Satan's puppet, or Ray, has moved into a hotel and tries his best to adjust. Zoe starts her first day of school, and Jesse gets some helpful hints on a new piece, and in all honesty, it looks pretty good. Good thing too, it's hard to sell a character who is an artist without showing them make anything good. That night they get a visit from Ray, and it doesn't go so well. He notices that Zoe has a tattoo of the guitar that he plays to drown out the whispers. Jesse ain't entertaining any of it, and he sends Ray away. But it looks like before he left, Ray left his guitar as a gift, but Jesse won't let Zoe keep it. With the bills piling up, Jesse desperately shows his latest art piece to a big-time art gala guy, and they say that they'll consider it. But it's not enough, and Jesse becomes possessed and alters one of his previous commissions of butterflies he did for a bank. He paints the souls of children over the butterflies, and at the same time, Ray has been providing the inspiration. Once his painting session ends, Jesse walks outside and hours have passed, and he rushes to pick up Zoe, who's been stuck at school until nightfall. He begs Zoe for them to be friends again. I've always thought it was weird that parents want to be best friends with their kids, but then again, my parents are different. To make up for it, Zoe gets to keep the guitar, and she could really use some lessons. Meanwhile, Ray brings the inspiration back to his place to finish the job. Kind of weird how he didn't do that where he found the kids, but we jump cut to Jesse's painting, and there are a couple more kids on the painting, and oh shit, Zoe's in the painting. So as time passes, Jesse's painting overcomes him, and it becomes more hell-like. What makes this painting not as good as the other one is Zoe's depiction. She stands out because her eyes aren't blacked out like the other kids, probably because she's still alive. For now. Speaking of, Ray gives Zoe a surprise visit while she's asleep. He begs her to be quiet so he doesn't have to kill her. So of course, she screams and he gets chased out of the place. The cops come to try to keep an eye on things, and the next morning Zoe insists on going to school. While she's at school, Jesse gets a call from the gala and has a meeting with the owner who wants to represent him. The guy is a bit of a dick and forces Jesse to be late in picking Zoe up. So, yeah, he was late enough for Ray to successfully kidnap her. That scene is a little bit frustrating, just because Jesse refuses to explain himself to the other guy. You know, most of the world's problems could be solved with good communication. Just tell the guy, hey, my daughter had a life or death scare very recently, so yeah, can't leave her alone, gotta go pick her up. I'm sure the guy would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, that's totally fine. But Jesse never says that, so the guy's like, nah, I'm gonna keep you here just because, you know, I own you now. So, yeah, whatever. So Ray takes Zoe back to his motel to saw her to pieces alive, which is pretty damn brutal. But Zoe is pretty resourceful and manages to escape, and it is believable and very well done. She gets to the police station and makes Jesse feel like shit. The police tell Jesse that Ray was put away in the loony bin for 20 years for trying to bury a little girl. And that was when Ray was a kid. The reason why is because Ray says he has to feed him, which obviously is Satan, children. They are his favorite candy. So, not a bad title for the movie. That night, Jesse destroys the painting that he has been working on while the family preps for the witness protection program. But Ray ain't gonna let that happen, so he cripples the two cops outside with his car and then finishes them off by crushing their skulls, shoots both Jesse and Astrid, drags Zoe upstairs, and preps to set the house on fire. Holy shit! Ray is a pretty capable psycho. As the house burns, Jesse gets a second wind and heads upstairs and beats Ray to death with the guitar Ray gave Zoe. Jesse and Zoe manage to make it out of the house alive before it completely burns down. Jesse is still connected to the house and its secrets, and they lead him to the spot on the property where Ray was burying suitcases of sawed-up kids, and the movie ends. So how was it? It's pretty damn good. I'll start with the negatives. The fire in the house sometimes seemed pretty fake. Jesse's gunshot wound looked like he got shot in the lung. That is a very serious wound, and you won't be very mobile after that, especially with what he had to do in the end. There's a reason it's a cliche to get shot in the upper corner chest area or the side of the abdomen in a movie, because it's not very fatal, and you can bounce back from it and do a lot with your adrenaline. And they keep doing it in movies because it makes sense. Jesse's bullet wound would have made him useless until the ambulance got there. Also, Ray almost shoots Astrid in the head, but is either out of bullets or he had a dud bullet. It's a bit of a nitpick, but the gun's slide wasn't in the lock position, so he still had bullets in it. So it would have had to have been a dud bullet, which is very rare considering it's a cop's gun. Or the person filming it doesn't know shit about guns and forgot to make the gun look like it was out of bullets. And for a moment like that in the movie, that's why revolvers work better in these scenes, people. An unanswered question is Satan's voice. It wasn't all in Ray's head, Jesse was hearing it too. So was it the house? Why didn't Zoe or Astrid hear it? Ray was pushed to give the devil his candy, and Jesse, I guess, was pushed to immortalize it through his art? Doesn't really add up super well, but it's not a serious gripe. And that's it. The positives are good acting, good script, more contained story. Maybe I'm experiencing big movie fatigue, but it's really nice and welcoming to watch a movie that doesn't have a world-ending or world-changing plot. I liked the art in this movie, and I like how it didn't do the obvious and have the heavy metal heads or heavy metal be the root of evil in this movie, because that would have been predictable and less interesting since religious zealots think the kind of music is of the devil, and they've thought that for decades. Another positive is that it's short. It's only an hour and 15 minutes long, and it never feels rushed. Very good movie, and I highly recommend. Not a movie that'll give you nightmares, but it's definitely dark. Thanks for watching, and stay spooky until the final 6.